Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday and happy 4th of July to everyone celebrating. Welcome to episode 4 of Sports Talk from the Heart with Nicky, Steez. You notice, using a different pair of glasses right here. I decided to use this instead of my work glasses. But yeah, let's get right into it. So for today's episode 4, we're going to discuss a lot of NBA discussion going down today. We know NBA free agency happened last week. A lot of moves were made, a lot of signings, few trades. Still a big rumor being discussed with trades coming down the line. Yes, sir. Mitch Kofsky, head of the Hardcore Sports Network. Happy 4th. He'll be on later with his usual MK headlines later tonight. And yes, let's get into it. So we're going to talk a little bit about, start with the Damian Lillard talk. It's been the hot subject over the past couple days. Let's get right into it. So Damian Lillard has requested a trade from the Portland Trailblazers. He no longer wants to be a Trailblazer. He decided he gave everything he had to that organization. He stayed loyal to them, tried to do everything he could to help them. The furthest they made it was the 2019 Western Conference Finals, but now he wants to move on and try to win a championship. And he has a specific destination in mind. Yes, that is the Miami Heat. Now, as far as Damian Lillard goes, look, I completely understand his case. Now, I'm a bit critical of players typically wanting trades as a whole. I think sometimes it can be the easy way out, but in Dame's case, I get it. He's actually a guy who did stay loyal, who wanted to see his team succeed, who decided to kept taking that mentality of come back and do better next year, come back and do better next year. But after a certain period of time, it's like there's only so much you can do. Try to stay loyal to an organization where you just decide, you know what, I've had enough. Let's move on. That's Damian Lillard's point he's at. But he wants to be in Miami Heat. And he wants, specifically, there's the possibility that maybe you could get Dame, Jimmy, and Bam Adebayo on the same team. But here's something to consider. The Heat, it doesn't seem like from what the reports we're hearing is that the Heat and Blazers have the room to make it happen. Seems like there's actually more room for Harden to get his request to go to the Clippers, but I'll get to that one later. However, so far, though, we're not sure if this could actually come together. Now, obviously, that's not saying that it's not going to happen because it still could happen, but don't be surprised if the trade ultimately doesn't go through. That's basically the gist of what I've been studying and reading over these past couple days. So there is the possibility, but obviously, we'll have to wait and see. Now, for if this trade does go through, what could possibly happen is we could have the possibility that maybe Duncan Robinson, but maybe Tyler Hero could be the one that could possibly get shipped to Portland. Maybe a little bit of future draft capital for them if this trade were to go through. And there is also the possibility, of course, another guy like Duncan Robinson could be involved in this trade. So there could be a package thrown in there if this trade does go through, which for the Trailblazers will put them in ultimate rebuild mode. They know they've only gotten so far with Dame. They know they're closer to rebuilding than they are actually contending for a championship. So if it happens for them, they're like, hey, let's just, for them, I don't blame them because they know they're closer to a rebuild than contending. And for the Miami Heat, this would be interesting right there for them because you're talking about a team who's developed chemistry with the guys they have already. They built that team up. Guys like Robinson, Adebayo, Jimmy, Hero's still there as of right now. They built up chemistry with that team. They have some undrafted guys that are solid role players for them. The thing is, if you bring in Damian Lillard, there is the possibility that could affect the chemistry of it because it's basically like starting over again, too. So you have to wonder, how would it actually play out? Would it take some time for the team to catch on? Would they start off struggling early and catch on as the season goes along? Because even when you go back to when LeBron went to the Heat, you remember those first couple months the Heat didn't play hot, but remember around Christmas break going into 2011, that's when the Miami Heat started to get hot and they started to build momentum that first year. So it is possible the Heat could struggle a little bit early on, but then build chemistry as the season goes along because that can sometimes happen when you're bringing in new talent. You're basically starting over. You have to change your game planning and your coaching up to fit that new talent strengths. And that could happen certainly here with a Damian Lillard. if he goes to the Miami Heat. You could have that right there. Or it might take a month or two for them to catch on. But then again, considering the Heat have done this before and it's been successful, it is possible it could happen. And Pat Riley knows a thing or two about contract structuring and putting together the right pieces on a team. So definitely don't underestimate Pat Riley's ability to do that there in the executive side. So if that happens, this could maybe give the Heat that room to contend. Maybe it does work with those guys. Maybe the chemistry flows there. Maybe they're able to get on the same page, and maybe that could help them get over the hump. That's a possibility if this trade goes through. And for the Blazers, obviously would be the sign of a rebuild right there. Because this team clearly, they're not going anywhere near a championship. Even if Dame ends up staying, even with Dame, Jeremy Grant, Scoot Henderson, they're not going to be in championship contention. So, yeah, even if those guys stay, they have to compete out west against possibly the Suns, assuming all their guys stay healthy. They'll be contenders. The Clippers could still be in the mix, too. You also got the Nuggets, of course. They'll be back in contention as well. The Lakers. You really think the Trailblazers, even if they keep Dame, are going to compete this year with those teams out in the West? Not happening. So for the Blazers, I mean, I think it'd be the worst thing you could do. It'd be worse off in the long term to keep Dame because what are you going to do? Just keep him there, hope he stays healthy, maybe get in the play-in tournament, get bounced in the opening round by a top team in the West? That's not going to do good for him in the long term. So I think actually the Blazers would be better off in the long term just moving on from Dame, saying thank you for your service. We're sorry it didn't work out in the end. Best of luck in your future endeavors, and dish him off. Now, it was discussed, too, that my team, the Sixers, they were in contention, but they're always in contention to land a Lillard trade, and we know how that always works. But they didn't want to get rid of Tyrese Maxey. So clearly, this wasn't going to go through. Now, to me, that was no surprise, but for some people in the sports media, it was. But the point I'm getting at is clearly it's obvious Damian Lillard wants to go to Miami. Now, the Nets have been thrown in there as a rumor, too, and Ben Simmons' name's thrown in there, which that's stupid to me. It doesn't make any sense. Where does Ben Simmons fit in with this? I think that's just a clickbait move to try to get people talking a little bit, trying to throw a twist in the discussion. But ultimately, I don't think that anything's going to come out of that with the Nets, so I'm not even going to bother addressing that. But ultimately, hey, you could be talking about a situation here with the Heat. Could have that roster of Jimmy, Dame, Bam, maybe some of the undrafted rookies you still have. They're already there. They're already familiar with the coach. They're familiar with, Jimmy and Bam. Now all they got to do is get on the same page with Damian Lillard. And I think Lillard's character and his personality, he's the type of player that could adjust better to that culture. So I think that could work out for him. Might take a month or two for the chemistry to formulate if this trade happens. But by the time he gets like Christmas break, that team could start rolling possibly. And for the Blazers, okay, what would you have? You'd have Scoot, Tyler Hero, which if you could get Tyler Hero involved in that trade, that'd be good for them for the future. And Jeremy Grant, some possible draft capital. Okay, that's not sparking contention in the short term, but in the long term, maybe if that team shows some promise early on and you invest in the draft picks right for the Blazers, maybe you can get a free agent or two to be willing to join you guys. Maybe they could benefit from that in the long term as well. But either way, hey, right now it's just discussion, though. I mean, it's interesting to talk about. It's a hot subject, but it's still just discussion as of right now. And like I said, there's still no guarantee it's actually going to happen. We're going to have to wait and see if a trade actually gets pulled off first. But yes, it's still nice. But this is a trade that's actually fun to talk about. But we will ultimately have to wait and see on the Damian Lillard one. Now I'm going to move on, switch gears here. Going to talk about free agency a little bit, go through some of the winners and losers of this year's NBA free agency so far. We're going to start with our winners. Winners, obviously the Los Angeles Lakers. No questions asked. I mean, these guys went out there. They re-signed some of their guys like Hachimura, Russell. They also added Gabe Vincent from the Heat, Tyron Prince from the Timberwolves. I mean, that's a good thing right there. Hey, good for them. I mean, they came to the close last year. They made a nice run late, got to the Western Conference Finals. I mean, they came pretty close, but then they ultimately got swept by a better team in the Denver Nuggets. But hey, for the Lakers, they know that despite LeBron James' age, they're a team that could still be in contention with the current pieces they got. So they had some room to spend. They re-signed their guys, got D'Angelo Russell there, got Hachimura there back. They went and added some pieces, gave Vincent from the Heat. He can be a role player there as well. Go and get Tyron Prince. Good for him. He can finally go to a real team and actually contribute there. Now, that's a good move. That's good for the Lakers right there. That's what a team that's in contention should do. Bring some of their guys back and add a few pieces. Maybe that'll help you get over the hump. So definitely the Lakers are winners right there. They also, speaking of teams that are adding pieces to try to get better, you also got the Cavs. They're adding Max Strus from the Heat to that roster. So that's good. You're taking a guy who's off a fresh run from the Heat. You're adding him to that roster, trying to get better. You're trying to push your, the Cavs, they finally made the playoffs last year. You just need to do something to get a little bit better. You still got your guys like your Evan Mobleys, your Darius Garlands. Now you're bringing a Max Strus in there to help out. Okay, that's solid right there. And I know there's somebody else I'm missing that they re-signed. Just can't remember it off the top of my head. You guys can comment if you remember who it is. But they also did have another big re-signing too. But yeah, that's a good move right there for the Cavs. So there's a couple winners right there. Now, for some of the losers of this one right here, actually, you know what? I got to consider. Actually, another winner is the Celtics. Because for the Celtics, here you go. You added Kristaps Porzingis to the team. You acquired him from the Wizards. I mean, you let Williams go, but hey, you know what? That's a nice piece. Maybe this is the piece you need. Maybe you bring in a Porzingis. Maybe bring something different to the table for the Celtics. Maybe they finally get over the hump. So that's a nice one right there too. Got Malik Beast came through. Shout out for stopping by. Commented. I'd say watch out for the Grizzlies. Now the Grizzlies, they did make a few moves. One of them is they got D Rose. Now D Rose is a veteran. Obviously, he's on the downswing of his career, but at this point for D Rose, it's a good move. It's a good move for the Grizzlies because now you're bringing in a guy who has some maturity. And that's good because the Grizzlies need some more maturity in that locker room. As talented as they are, especially with, one of the things they're lacking is maturity, especially with the John Morant issues. And realized they had to let go of Dylan Brooks, which I'll get to that one when I get to the Rockets. But now you also have Desmond Baines back, you have Brandon Clark. I mean, John Morant, you're hoping that he comes. Oh, yeah, and don't forget Marcus Smart, too. Don't forget him. That's a good piece right there. So, obviously, for the Grizzlies, you're bringing in Marcus Smart, and you got veteran D Rose, which adds some more maturity to their roster, which is certainly something they need, because that was also one of the big things that hurt them when it mattered most, especially come playoff times. So they got rid of part of the issue with Dylan Brooks, brought in some other pieces. Marcus Smart guy who is good with the Celtics system. He's a credible player, and you're adding him to this roster. You feel like he can certainly be better than a Dylan Brooks. So that's so far, some nice moves there. And shout out to Beast for pointing it out. And right as indicated. Hold on a sec. You got Smart and D Rose, definitely two locker room leaders for sure. So that was good right there. Now, for the losers of this one, got to start off with the Bulls. The Chicago Bulls re-signing Vucevic, who he's not a scrub, but is he really worth getting paid the amount of money he is? Is he really worth top center money? No, he's not. Vucevic isn't that guy. I mean, he's a solid guy. I mean, he puts up some decent statistical numbers, but there are times when it mattered most. He gets destroyed. He got destroyed by Brook Lopez last year. And ultimately, this team with him as one of their main players did not make the playoffs. They choked in the play-in tournament against the Heat for the number 8 seed. So ultimately, you're bringing him back. You got Zach LaVine back if you're the Bulls. And also Lonzo, there's a good possibility. Sadly, his career might be over. You don't have a whole lot of peak. Kobe White's back. I mean, does this really scream to you if championship team or contending team? No, it doesn't. And like I've said before, I think Zach LaVine, well, he's a respectable player. He's an all-star. He's not a true number one guy. He's not. So I think you bring back Zach LaVine, who's overrated. I think now their chickens are coming home to roost for that contract. It just does not look good for the Bulls, basically. Too many of the same pieces, and they're staying stuck in the same position. So that's a big L for them right there. The T-Wolves, another one. They lost Tyron Prince. I mean, they did get Anthony Edwards back, but where this team's been just a first-round elimination with him there anyway. I mean, it's good for them that he's there, but what did the Timberwolves really do that indicated, okay, they're going to take that next step? They didn't do anything in my eyes to make that suggestion at all. If anything, I see them being stuck in the same position. So I got to see them as losers too. Do you really want to stay stuck as a first round elimination over and over again, reoccurring playing team, first round elimination? So I got to consider that an L. Another one is the Rockets. They've gotten a little too guard heavy right now. And they got Van Vliet, one of the top free agents. But even with Van Vliet, I mean, he's a solid player when utilized in the right position. But here's the thing. With Van Vliet, doesn't exactly have a great shooting percentage. So he's not exactly the most reliable shooter in the world. And then now you're bringing in Dillon Brooks, who there's still some red flags there with maturity about Dillon Brooks, wondering, okay, is he going to be able to contain himself in the locker room? Are you going to have drama with him like you had with the Grizzlies? Now, to be fair, John Morant also has his drama too, so it takes two to tango, for lack of a better term. But is this really a good idea right here? And the Rockets, I mean, you got one of the Thompsons, and you just got, and he said the Clippers should blow things up, which that's going to tie into another subject I got coming on about the Clippers and a trade rumored with them. Yeah, which I'll get to that in a second. As I was saying, though, the Rockets, what did the Rockets really, I mean, it looked like they were starting to trend in the right direction recent years, but now, I don't know, this free agency class, like, who's their real big man on this team? Who? Exactly. I mean, I can't think of it. I mean, if anyone, I mean, this is just, And of course, the Orlando Magic, too. They become way too reliant on guards. But there's some of the losers right there. And speaking of losers, it's going to tie into my team, the 76ers, which also ties into the previous comment about the Clippers blowing things up. And the reason why is because James Harden, who initially signed that contract with the Sixers, so they could work on a trade. And it's been reported that James Harden wants to go to the Clippers. So now this will tie into that right there. So you got the Los Angeles Clippers, who they do need to blow it up because they're stuck. They're stuck with what they have. Kawhi and Paul George can't stay healthy. And you can rarely get those two on the court at the same time. And you got Russell Westbrook back, who, he was coming off the bench last year as a solid player, but you're bringing him back. I mean, what are you doing really at this point if you're the Clippers? What big moves have you made to progress going forward? And if you're going to bring in a James Harden, if the Clippers really want a situation where they got themselves Harden, Paul George, and Kawhi, you really think that's going to work out? First off, you can't even keep Kawhi and Paul George on the court long enough. And then you expect James Harden, who, despite his great regular season play, is a notorious playoff choker? You think that's going to be the answer there? And look, teams need to start realizing that this super team thing, it does not really work anymore. It only works if you have the right pieces and you know how to build the right roster. Like the Miami Heat, they did it with LeBron, D-Wade, and Bosh, but you had Pat Riley, who knows the contract side of it, who also got good pieces there, like Shane Battier, Ilgauskas, on the down swing, but still effective role players, Ray Allen and Rashad Lewis. Also, Eddie Jones. I mean, these guys, they also knew how to build a team around, too. But a lot of these super teams, all they try to do is, recent years, they try to go in, just get a bunch of stars, but don't really have the right depth pieces. And usually times it's stars that can't play together. I don't see that at all working out there. James Harden, Paul George, and Kawhi. Now, if the Clippers are dumb enough to take that offer, me as a Sixers fan, I'll take it. I'll take it. I'll gladly say, hey, take James Harden if you want him, if they're crazy enough to do it. It's just absolutely absurd. And let's see, Durant, you said the Thunder, which on paper they were. That didn't work. Then the Warriors. That worked out great. And then you had, but even then he slithered his way out of that one, went to the Nets. Oh, with Kyrie and Harden. Ooh. Then you had the Nets, or not the Nets. He went to the Suns just recently, tried with CP3, Devin Booker, and Eaton. Well, that didn't work out. But now you can bring Bradley Beal into the mix to take the Chris Paul spot. I mean, Kevin Durant. I mean, the thing is, while we're still in that subject, I used to be a fan of Durant about a decade ago. When he was on the Thunder, I was a fan of him, and I respected him back then. But ever since he's turned into the biggest figurative snake in the NBA, always weaseling his way out of situations so he can try to go join the next big team and win a championship, I can't respect that. And people used to give LeBron flack for joining the Heat, and okay, to some degree, you could say maybe that was a bit of the cowardly way out, to a degree. But then again, you think about it. In LeBron's situation with the Cavs, I understand it was, look, he tried his best to carry that team, but he clearly didn't have the right pieces there. So I understand he wanted to go to a situation where he knew he'd have the right pieces around him. I at least understand that. You can say it was a cowardly move if you want to, but I understand. Whereas with Durant, you had a 3-1 lead on the Warriors. You had them on the ropes. You lost 3 straight. Instead of coming back the next year, making sure you beat them to get over that hump, he just goes and joins them and gets his 2 rings the cowardly way. Then he tries to slither his way off to another super team, which doesn't work. And then eventually, when things were finally in position for him to try to prove he could lead a team with the Nets, what does he do? He slithers his way out of there. I mean, it's such a shame that a player with that talent turned out to be so unlikable. It's a shame because I was a fan at one point, but ever since he started moving from team to team, I just lost respect for him as a person. I still respect his talent, but that's it. That's all. And for the Suns, I mean, hey, good luck, but here's the thing with them. They don't have depth, and with all that money they have locked up in their starters, I don't really think they can sign anyone in free agency. And cleared so far, you haven't seen them sign anyone notable, so that goes to show you right there what investing all your eggs in your starters can do. So say, all investing all your eggs in one basket, in this case being the starters, is done. Leaves you no room to sign depth because you don't have the money to sign those guys. It's a fail right there. And for the Six, now getting back on subject with this whole James Harden thing, and that's the problem with the guy. The problem with Harden is he's holding up the Sixers again. He did it with the Rockets. He did it with the Nets. Now he's doing it with the Sixers because he wants to go to the Clippers. And the Sixers signed him only with the intention that they're going to trade him. Of course, Daryl Morey. Yeah, this worked out so well for you one time, right? Who'd have thought? But then again, to be fair, Morey was fired before Harden was traded. And he went to the Sixers before that trade from the Rockets to the Nets. So there's probably still some respect between them. But now, Daryl Morey, you're starting to see what happens when you do business with the devil. But this trade, I mean, this could go through maybe. I mean, the Sixers, maybe they might get some pieces. It would be nice if they could get something in return, maybe. Marcus Morris, maybe. And even then, I don't know how much they're going to get. And with the Sixers, they took an L, maybe a Nick Batum, maybe. I mean, maybe it's a situation where the Clippers, they give up maybe a Nick Batum and a Marcus Morris and maybe possibly a Norman Powell. You know, and they go with the guys like Russ, Zubac, Kawhi, Paul George, Harden. Maybe we get in return some of those guys right there. Like I said, then you get Embiid, Maxey, Batum, Marcus Morris, and Tobias. That doesn't spell the most optimism to me because remember, we were originally supposed to trade Tobias, but it's looking like that's not going to happen because for whatever reason, Daryl Morey seems to think that Nick Nurse. Now, I understand Nick Nurse won a championship with the Raptors. He seems to think that just simply bringing Nick Nurse in and maybe only making one or two moves is going to put him in contention. But it's really not. I mean, we got Patrick Beverley, but okay, we got Patrick Beverley. I mean, he fills a spot on the bench, but what else do we got? What else do we got on our bench beside that? We got a bunch of trash. Dwayne Dedman, Montrezl Harrell, who didn't pan out. Korkmaz, who's terrible. You got Patrick Beverley off the bench, and what else? I mean, that's not going to be enough right there. Now, granted, Nick Nurse is certainly a better coach than Doc Rivers, but even then with Nick Nurse, now he last year with the Raptors, when he didn't have the best pieces there, he didn't have a bench. You saw how that worked out. Now, granted, Nick Nurse is walking to a better situation with the Sixers roster, especially with Embiid and Maxey. And with Tobias, my thing with Tobias is it's a bad contract. The reason I wanted the Sixers to trade Tobias is because he's getting paid too much money, if you ask me. They're paying too much for a guy like Tobias, who is a solid player, but he's not worth the type of money he's getting. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, you got a solid roster over there, but I also think, too, with the Sixers, you need some decent pieces on the bench, too. Patrick Beverley and the other scrubs like Korkmaz, that's not going to be Dedman. That's not going to do it off the bench. That's not. You need something in return. And I was hoping they would pull off a trade. I was wanting them to initially pull off a trade with the Pacers, maybe get Buddy Hield or a piece or two in return, but that don't look like it's going to happen for the Sixers. It don't. And at this point, seeing all the signings, who could they get at this point? Seth Curry, 08, he went to the Mavericks. And is TJ Warren still out there on the let me see. Is TJ Warren still available? Or did he re-sign with the Suns? What happened with TJ Warren? But there's not much out there, really, for the Sixers to get at this point. The best thing you can do is hope you find a trade partner for Harden and get a few decent pieces in return. And with the Clippers, I mean, like I said, I would like to maybe get Batum, Morris Sr., maybe get some decent pieces there, but even then, we don't know if that's going to happen or not. So for the Sixers, roster-wise, this has not been a good offseason for them. This is not. And we got to wonder who, I mean, they did bring in some undrafted guys, but who? What are these guys going to do? Are these guys even going to get playing time? And PJ Tucker, it's like, and we still got PJ Tucker under contract, who last year, all he was good for was corner threes and rebounds. That's it. I mean, he would hit maybe like one or two corner threes a game, but that's really about it. I just don't know I don't really know with the Sixers what else. I mean, they'll probably, Nurse is certainly a better coach, so they could possibly be better equipped to maybe make it past the second round this time around, maybe make it to the conference finals, but we'll have to wait and see, though. It'll be interesting to see, but with that bench, though, that's the thing. Beside Patrick Beverley, what do you have right now? I mean, that's all you got. And James Harden, if they do end up ultimately keeping him, you're going to go into it knowing that James Harden doesn't deliver come playoff time. Like, yeah, you'll get some good regular season play from the guy, but, come playoff time, he doesn't bring his best. I mean, he had 2 good games against the Celtics, but where was he the other 5 games? Do you really want to run the risk of that happening again? And knowing how James Harden deals with being held accountable, don't think he's going to react well to Nick Nurse holding him accountable. And he's basically holding him hostage. It's like, Sixers got to do something. They got to work their way out of this Harden situation and see what they get and go from there. But yes, So that's the main NBA talk, though. So before I end this, I do want to talk about ESPN and their layoffs right there. Exactly. We've known that. Oh, we've known that about the NBA for years. It's been a player run show. It has been throughout my lifetime, at least. Definitely for sure. In NFL, yeah, it is more of a coach's league. If that is for sure. And now I'm going to switch gears to the final subject. We're going to talk about ESPN a little bit. So ESPN, it broke the news. There has been a lot of layoffs at ESPN. A lot of their main personalities getting laid off too. Max Kellerman, who's on First Take, had the Fight Game show, whatever it was called, where he talks about boxing. He's been laid off. He's one of their main guys that's been there for years. You also got Jalen Rose, who had been there for years since his retirement from the NBA. He's gone. You also got Steve Young, who had been there a long time since the end of his career. He's gone. And then Susie Colbert. Susie Colbert has been there forever. And we all remember Susie Colbert from that infamous interview with Joe Namath back in the 2003 season on that Saturday night game. We all remember that interview. But Susie Colbert, she stayed there for years. And I at least respected the fact that she was able to stick around for years. But she's gone too. And this is crazy with ESPN. They've lost so many. Guy also got Keyshawn Johnson's gone too. Gotta wonder. I mean, ESPN, because they've been hemorrhaging money for years now. This is why these mass layoffs keep happening. And there was even a point a few years back where Stephen A had to take a cut too. He had to take a pay cut just to stay. Him and Scott Van Pelt, two of their main personalities. I mean, part of the reason why ESPN's in the position they're in, where they're doing so many mass layoffs, is because they're such a stale entity. They are. The way their network is run, because if you think about it, I mean, ESPN, what do you really look at ESPN for beside live sports? Exactly. I mean, maybe First Take, but even then, most people are just watching the clips of it on YouTube. They're not actually sitting down watching a whole episode of First Take. Most of those views they get is from online clips. So, yeah, but then you also got, right, and then the over-reliance on personalities has been one of the things. And here's the irony is, despite First Take's success, I think in the long term, First Take did a little more harm because they tried to overdo that formula that worked well on First Take. That formula initially with Stephen A, Skip, it worked. You had Stephen A had the right, he has the right personality. He has the charisma to be that large personality on the show. That grumpy, loud personality. It works. He's the main draw now of their network. But the problem is now ESPN, they've tried way too much to rely on those personalities. And it lacks authenticity. One of the best personalities ESPN had was the late Stuart Scott. And one of the reasons why is because he had authenticity with it, what he did. And a lot of those personalities right there, like you had with PTI, with Tony Kornheiser and what's-his-face, that worked out well for them. I mean, those were good programs for them. Around the Horn was another good one too, but in recent years, they come over-reliant on skits with like stupid arm wrestling contests and the stupid three-point shootouts and with their personalities, and half the time they're just showing off sneakers. They don't even really give you much highlights anymore. The only thing you really get out of it is live sports itself. And usually most of the things they do on their, they just over talk on their shows. And as far as like politics, some people point to that as part of the problem. The problem is with ESPN is they became way too over-reliant on social and political issues to the point that it was going to drive away some portion of their viewers. ESPN was stuck in a position when you take a political stance, regardless of what side they take, you're going to alienate a portion of your audience. If you're out there constantly talking about this every day on the network, like ESPN has been at some points, eventually a certain portion of your base that doesn't like what you have to say and doesn't like the stances you take are going to start tuning you out. So that's part of the problem right there. They push that political thing to the point where no matter what side they take, they're going to alienate a portion of their audience. And considering this, the stances they took, because what happened was ESPN, when they signed that package with the SEC, a lot of those places where those SEC teams played didn't like what ESPN was saying. So they alienated some of their partners there. It's just, so there's that right there. They became over reliant on social and political issues. Like, obviously, there's certain subjects, like the Kaepernick subject, that had to be talked about. If you're a major news sports network, you had to talk about that. The NBA players boycotting that game back in 2020 for a little bit. The Bucks, who was it? The Bucks and who was it again? Like, I forget off the top of my head, but that was something that needed to be talked about. So yeah, there were certain things that you definitely got to talk about from a social and political standpoint if you're one of these networks. But when you got a mixed demographic and you're specifically taking one side, that's not going to be good for your overall base. You're going to have certain people, certain portions of your base are going to be alienated. And that right there. But again, the over reliance on personalities and skits drove a lot of people away. Because the people, when you tune into ESPN, you're not really getting information. And looking at it from my point of view, with my content I consume, I watch your guys' videos because you guys actually talk about content. You talk about trades that have happened. You guys are actually sharing news right there. So I check what you guys are saying out. Here on YouTube, I check out your shorts because that's actually where I get some news on what's going on some hirings, on some behind-the-scenes stories. So it's actually, obviously for ESPN, they fell behind the times and they stopped giving the people what they wanted. And now they're stuck in this position where they're doing all these mass layoffs because they're not providing people with information. They're providing them with a bunch of meaningless skits, which they don't want. They just wanted sports information. And here on YouTube, a lot of people recording in their house or their basement or wherever are doing more of that. People are watching our videos instead. But there is also the possibility ESPN could be making way for a big offer to Pat McAfee. They could be releasing these guys so they could offer Pat McAfee a big contract, which if you're an ESPN, if you're going to go for a Pat McAfee or Shannon Sharp, they're going to have to pay up to get those guys to want to join their network, especially in a Pat McAfee because he built his show on his own. He built down his own through the internet. He didn't have ESPN there. He didn't have FS1 or CBS doing it for him. He built it up on his own. So if you're one of these major networks and you want Pat McAfee on there, you better pay him a ton of money to join. And that's ultimate. So that is a possibility too right there. But ESPN, they're certainly on the downswing. They've been that way for years. They've turned into a joke at this point, honestly. And these mass layoffs prove it, that especially since they're letting go so many main personalities on there. It goes to show they're hemorrhaging money and they're not interesting product anymore. People aren't interested in seeing them. But I'll pretty much leave it at that. So to everyone that tuned in today, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Happy 4th of July. So, until next time, Nicky Steez signing off.